Reading from Genesis chapter 7, from 17 to 24, and then from chapter 8, verses 1 to 12. For 40 days the flood kept coming on the earth, and as the waters increased, they lifted the ark high above the earth. The waters rose and increased greatly on the earth, and the ark floated on the surface of the water. They rose greatly on the earth, and all the high mountains under the entire heavens were covered. The waters rose and covered the mountains to a depth of more than 15 cubits. Every living thing that moved on the land perished: birds, livestock, wild animals, all the creatures that swarm over the earth, and all mankind. Everything on dry land that had breath of life in its nostrils died. Every living thing on the face of the earth was wiped out, people and animals and the creatures that move along the ground, and the birds were wiped from the earth. Only Noah was left, and those with him in the ark. The waters flooded the earth for 150 days. From chapter 8, but God remembered Noah and all the wild animals and the livestock that were with him in the ark, and he sent a wind over the earth, and the waters receded. Now the springs of the depth and the floodgates of the heavens had been closed, and the rain had stopped falling from the sky. The water receded steadily from the earth. At the end of 150 days, the water had gone down. And on the 17th day of the 7th month, the ark came to rest on the mountain of Ararat. The waters continued to recede until the 10th month, and on the first day of the 10th month, the top of the mountains became visible. After 40 days, Noah opened a window he had made in the ark and sent out a raven, and it kept flying back and forth until the water had dried up from the earth. Then he sent out a dove to see if the water had receded from the surface of the ground. But the dove could find nowhere to perch because there was water all over the surfaces of the earth. So it returned to Noah in the ark. He reached out his hand and took the dove and brought it back to himself in the ark. He waited 7 more days and again sent out the dove from the ark. When the dove returned to him in the evening, there in its beak was a freshly plucked olive leaf. Then Noah knew that the water had receded from the earth. He waited 7 more days and sent the dove out again. But this time, it did not return to him. May God add his understanding to that reading.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Nā mihi nui, tēnā koutou katoa. Ka tangi te titi, ka tangi te kaka, ka tangi hoki hau. Ko kawawaru te manga, ko waiora, te awa, ko rongapai te waka, ko ehu koari te tangata, ko Peter Takuri Nawa, he honrei he korea, e te atu a te hei Māori ora. Really warm welcome. Thank you for leaning in and listening for the message. I'm not Māori by descent, but as a sooty shearwater comes from overseas and lends its voice to the local kaka, I want to lend my voice to the journey that we're on. Calvary is where I had my second birth. Waiora is the rivers of living water that flow within me. Rongapai is the gospel that I carry and the message that I want to share, and Jesus Christ is my roomie. While Bev and I were in Dunedin, we have the privilege of advertising 2 positions for clinical AOD workers. And when we shortlisted the people, we had 3 people who we thought were really promising. So we interviewed the 3 people, and 2 already had AOD experience. And so it was natural for us to say these 2 got it. We didn't send an email to the third person. We invited her, and let's say her name is Georgia. And as we sat down with Georgia and says, listen, all three of you's interviewed really well, but we've given the two positions to two other people. You haven't been successful. And rightly so, Georgia was disappointed. You can see her head goes down. Jobs are not easy to get in Dunedin. And then I said, I've invited you here because that's not the final answer. We actually like how you interviewed, and we want you on board. And we said the only reason you didn't get the job was because you didn't have AOD experience, but we want to offer you this job. It's 20 hours a week, and we'll coach you and train you to get qualified. It's 20 hours a week, and it's an opportunity for you to build up your experience. I noticed that for Georgia, she's got this disappointment that she didn't get the job she asked for, but she's also grappling with the opportunity that's just opened up that she didn't expect. She'd requested this job here, but had the opportunity to receive this here, and the two were not what she had asked for. She was getting an answer that she didn't ask for. The outcome, sorry, that's not right. Sometimes the outcome of what we ask for isn't what we anticipated or we were expecting. We then have a choice of accepting what has been opened up to us. It took a moment or two for Georgia to move from disappointment to delight. It took her a moment to realize that the answer wasn't what she asked for, but there was nothing wrong with what was opening up in front of her, what we were gifting her. And there's that sense that we live with answers that we didn't always ask for. And if we don't wait and we don't look, we can often miss them because we're looking at the wrong thing. For example, Numbers 21. Israel is heading for the Red Sea, and it's taking the people longer to get there than they anticipated. And so they're starting to grumble, they're starting to complain, they're starting to get a little bit Nancy with each other, and they're becoming curveball complainers. And the more they grumbled, the more they complained, they attract snakes, poisonous snakes, into their midst. And the consequence of their grumbling was that poisonous snakes came in, some were bitten and some were dying. And Israel comes before Moses and says, Moses, we're sorry. Please ask your God to take these snakes away. Take these poisonous, venomous things away so that we can get in with life. In fact, the people say this, pray that the Lord will take the snakes away from us. Do you hear the request? Moses goes before God, and God says this. The Lord said to Moses, make a snake. Make a bronze version of what you see in your presence and put it up on a pole. Anyone who is bitten can look at it and be healed. Note the answer wasn't what Moses asked for or even what the people of Israel asked for. Instead of removing the snakes, God adds one extra to their problem. Except this one is put up on a pole, and when they look at it and they're hurting, they're able to be healed. The people asked that the snakes be abolished. And God's answer was an antidote for their problem. Sometimes if we don't take the time to wait and see what God is doing, the way God is answering, we can miss the point altogether. We do get answers, but they may not always be what we ask for. 2 Samuel chapter 15. David's on the run. Absalom has taken over the family business, and he's ruling, and David's on the run. He's crying, he's barefoot. He doesn't know whether he's going to make it to the end of the day or whether he'll even be alive at the end of the day. He's weeping and barefoot, and David understands this, that as long as Absalom is back in the castle and in that place there, and he has Ahithophel who offers wisdom to him and offers wise insight, He knows that the combination of wise advice and the worst assailant will make David's life more miserable and more challenging than he could ever imagine. And so David prays. David says, "O Lord, turn Ahithophel's counsel into nonsense. Turn his wisdom into foolishness." He's kind of saying, before Ahithophel gets to speak his wisdom and spout out there what's really, really good, can you confound his wisdom so it can't be used as a weapon against me? And David says to God, confuse the advice when he speaks. Read a little bit further, and Ahithophel gets to speak. And he speaks as one who inquires of God. In fact, all those who are listening, the wise men around him say, actually, that's really good advice. There's nothing wrong with that. We should go ahead and do that. And if right now, if you were to stop the message right there, David's prayer hasn't been answered. Wisdom has been spoken, and it looks like that David's life is about to get miserable. The sage has spoken, and it seems like a done deal, and David's demise is certain. But wait. There's a crowd around Ahithophel who's listening to what's going on. And these people are minor players that play a major part, and God does the unthinkable. He turns the hearts of the people right around. And there's the listeners who begin to speak, and they come up with another plan. And it's as crazy as it seems. God turns the heart of the people and actually say, the second plan is better than the first plan. Ahithophel's advice is not confounded, but somebody else's voice becomes more convincing. And basically, about then, the dominoes start to fall. Absalom's fall is a demise, and it brings about David's salvation. David got an answer he didn't ask for. It didn't happen the way that he thought it would happen, but it worked. Answers that we ask for, but didn't expect them to be answered in the way that they did. Like, for example, the Lord's Prayer says, "Lord, give us this day our daily bread." And when we're asking for our daily bread, sometimes we think we're physically asking for the loaf of bread. And in a sense, there's nothing wrong with a tangible answer to prayer. And if you get in my mind, there is an element of the miraculous with this loaf of bread. Yes, you have to sow the ground. Yes, you have to take a seed and put it in the ground, and that's where the miraculous happens. Somewhere God injects life into that seed, it grows, it produces what it needs to do. But then I have to harvest it, then I have to get the wheat and I've got to ground it, then I've got to make a dough, put it in the oven, and then I get my loaf of bread. Sometimes a loaf of bread, when we say, God, give us this day our daily bread, there's a small amount of the miraculous that is in it. For example, if you're finding it financially tough and you say to God in the morning, God, can you give me this day our daily bread? You know that I've got more month than I've got money. I don't know how I'm going to make ends to meet, but can you give us this daily bread, the things that you know I need to be able to get through? And we're kind of expecting the loaf of bread. But we go to work on Monday morning, the boss calls us into his office and he says, Peter, we've got a lot of work coming up. Are you open to doing some more overtime, please? And we'll pay you accordingly. Sometimes a loaf of bread is a small amount of the miraculous, but there's some work we need to do to make it happen. But what if we are praying, give us this day our daily bread, and God begins to give us something that looks more like flakes from heaven, bread of heaven. And the flakes that we get are kind of, can I use the phrase, 50% miraculous. God does his part, but we do our part. Are you with me? Sometimes when we're praying for the loaf of bread and we're expecting the loaf of bread, God answers with bread from heaven, and that's not what we're expecting. We're looking for this and we can't see that. We get answers that we didn't ask for. And if we don't wait, if we don't allow our eyes to adjust, we don't allow our prejudice to adjust, and we just see that, we will miss the provision of God. But what if? What if we're saying, God, give us this day our daily bread, and He doesn't give us the flakes, but He gives us the bread of life. And here's an even greater difficulty. This here is very visible. This here is partially visible. This here is totally invisible. And we can't see it. And if we're looking for this and we don't see that, we're going to miss this altogether. And if we're not careful, we will begin to miss the miracle of God. We ask God to give us this day our daily bread, and when the answer isn't the loaf, we request that it can take some time to recognize what God is actually doing. And what if this daily bread isn't the loaf of bread, but the bread of life? And this is something we stand before, but this is something that we stand in. Christ in me and I in Christ. And because we're looking for something visible, we miss the miraculous and miss the answer that's always been with us, that can cope with us and can take us on a journey and do what we need to do. One of the things I notice about this is that we get to cultivate part of the answer to prayer with a little bit of the miraculous. This here is something we get to count on every day. God brought an answer. God brought supply to us. You can count on this, but this is something that is continuous. We are always standing in the answer to prayer. Is this not important? Yes, it's tangible, and we do need that from time to time. But one of the things we don't expect is that we're standing in the answer of prayer every moment of the day. And if we're not looking for that, if we're expecting something else, it can be very difficult to process that. And isn't it better for the invisible who gives us the strength that we can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, that I've learned to be content in every situation? We do that because of the invisible answer that's in us, and I'm standing in that answer. And that's what God does. The bread of life answer to what we ask for is the least visible, but it is also of the greatest value we could ever want. That's because God's answer isn't visibly seen. It doesn't mean to say it's of no less value. And isn't it interesting, this is the most miraculous, but we seem to tend to want the least miraculous. We want something visible. We want to see our loaf of bread before us, and we know that God has answered us. And that can be a struggle for us, because while we're praying for this and we don't see it, and God's answering this and God's doing this, we kind of think God doesn't love me because I don't see a visible answer. Maybe my prayers aren't being heard. Maybe I'm not praying the right language. Maybe I'm not loving enough when I'm praying. And we begin to doubt that God doesn't love me because we don't see the actual answer of the loaf of bread that is there. And yet all the time, God's providing something far more than we could ask, think, or imagine. And the very thing that we get to stand before, the answer that comes and is with us all the time, is something that we stand in. We stand in the answer all the time. And we've got to learn to appreciate that and to see that. And sometimes that requires a waiting to see, so there you are, God. So that's what it looks like. That's what it is. God is not limited by what we think up or can even pray. Sometimes we expect too little from God and too much about my performance to pray. When we ask for our daily bread and God doesn't answer, what we're really saying and thinking in our mind is that God didn't answer the way I wanted Him to. And while we're there, we miss the whole point. So let's land in Noah. Noah has heard that there's judgment coming, there's a flood coming, And part of the answer to him is the trouble, and for him to work through the chaos that's coming, and where every mankind, everything that has been achieved for themselves in 40 days is going to get bowled over. It's going to get flood. And basically what God is saying to Noah is this, that everyone who's on the ark gets saved. It doesn't matter what in the community you've built, what reputation you have, how much money you've made, what position you've worked yourself into. If your faith is not in God, you're not going to be saved. If you're not in the ark, you don't get saved. In actual fact, if God is not the one who is saving you, you're not being saved at all. And at that point, Noah is hoping that maybe he would be able to avoid this coming judgment. Maybe he's thinking, I can get out of this. Maybe I don't have to go through this. And maybe God will protect me about this. And he wouldn't himself have to experience it. But if you have a look at Noah, who walked with God, and go back to his great-grandfather Enoch, who also walked with God. And Enoch also knew about judgment that's coming. He also, after his son Methuselah was born, his name Methuselah means when I die it comes. Enoch also knew about the judgment that's coming. But doesn't it seem kind of unfair to you that Enoch knew about the judgment, but he gets taken away before it comes, and Noah has to go through what somebody else gets to avoid? Have you ever wondered why you, like Noah, have to experience what seems awful and other people get to avoid it? How come people like Enoch know the same stuff about me? We both walk with God, and Enoch gets to miss it, and I have to go through it. How come God doesn't answer my prayers like he does for others? How come God takes me through something while others get transferred and avoid the hard times? The answer Noah got from God may not be what he asked for. It may not be what he had preferred. And maybe he was looking for the loaf of bread to the answer to his prayers of getting out what he was facing. But what he doesn't realize when he's in the ark and he's standing in answered prayer, his feet are in answered prayer. Whether you have to go through something or wherever it is, you're standing in answered prayer. And I think that's important to be able to see. Then Noah is afloat. You might say he's out of his depth. He's 20 feet above the highest mountain range. And while he feels that he's out of his depth, what he doesn't see that God is working to orchestrate his deliverance. And I can't help but note that the ark is on the surface of the water, and Noah may be looking for signs out there of what is changing and what is happening. Noah may be on the surface looking for his loaf of bread and see, there's God at work. That's the answer that I'm looking for, I need to aim for. But he can't see anything that gives him hope. When you're 20 feet above the lowest or the highest landmark, you can't tell whether the tide's coming in or the tide's going out. And chapter 8, verse 2 says, Now the springs of the deep had been closed. While Noah is on the surface, God is in the depth, plugging up what is adding to the problem that he's experiencing. You with me with that one? Noah is on the surface and he's looking out and he can't see God at work. But deep down, God is plugging up the streams that are coming in and adding to his problem. And he's asking for a sign, but actually deep down, God is doing something greater. We can all experience deprivation. We were often too shallow and we skim the surface of life far too much and of the spirituality. And the answer Noah wasn't looking for was the things that were no longer happening. Unless you're open, unless you're taking time to wait, unless you're thinking about what God is up to, it's the things that aren't happening that's the answer to the prayer of what is happening. Things aren't taking place anymore. The things that stopped happening were the signs that God was up to something. It was the subtle changes, the things that weren't happening, and some things had stopped. And if we're expecting my answer to a loaf of bread, we will miss the life-changing moments of what God is doing right beneath my feet, at the depth levels that are sometimes unseen. And Noah waits. 3 times he waits. He goes into the ark and the door is closed, and he waits for the rain to come. He sends out the dove, and the dove comes back, and he waits 7 days. And while that time there, he's waiting to see if there's any evidence of God at work, and he waits another 7 days to see if it's time to go. And all that time, Noah is working back, getting information. He's seeing what God's up to and what he's doing. And even though Noah works to get information, he still waits for God's instructions of when to act. Maybe walking with God is about learning to wait. Wait for God to act, but also wait to see what the answer is that God's bringing for me. Maybe learning to wait is what builds resilience in us so that we don't control or manipulate or try to over-manage a situation, twisting and forcing things to happen. Maybe like Noah, to walk with God means that I learn to wait and see God at work and do his best. When our answers aren't what we ask for, wait and make the choice to see what God is doing. God's accomplishing far more than we can imagine. The days you're experiencing may feel awful right now, may feel that God's not answering your prayers. Maybe you're having to go through something that you never thought was possible. But if you wait with an open mind, whatever it is that you're not in it without God. Every day is a moment where the miraculous is taking place. Even though you don't see him working, he is. Even if you can't feel him working, he is. Know that. And whether you recognize it or not, in Christ, we're living in answered prayer right now. Let me leave you with this scripture. For since the beginning of the world, Isaiah 64 says, since the beginning of the world, men have not imagined or heard or perceived by either, neither has the eye paid attention to God beside you, who helps, acts, does great things for the one who waits for him. I want to leave you with some questions to think about. If God's not saving you, you're not being saved, what do you make of that statement? Are you relying on your efforts, your position, being a good boy or girl? If God's not saving you, you're not being saved. Where am I being so focused on what I ask God for that I haven't recognized his answer? Where am I looking for the loaf, but I haven't recognized his presence? We're looking for the loaf of bread, not the bread of life. Where are we realizing we're already in the answer and to lean into that? How is the image of a loving God been impacted because of what you've been through and others haven't? Is there evidence in your life that your resilience to wait is a result of standing in God, answering your prayer? What do you think about those questions? I'm going to play a song by Colton Dixon called Build a Boat. And I want you to hear these words. Every word you say is going to come true. You will lead me to the promised land. Everything you say is going to happen, even though I haven't seen it yet. I'll ride the storm because I've got you by my side. With the wind in my sails, your love never fails or fades. You're the map, you're my compass. You help me navigate the currents underneath. Take the lead, I surrender. Please don't just read these questions and and skip over them. Pick one and say, okay, so God, help me see what you want me to do with this. And if there's a question that says, I'd like some prayer about that, can I invite you to respond? It's interesting, the animals came on the ark easier than the human beings did who heard the same call. Sometimes we need to step out and say, God, if this is your answer, I'm buying into it. If God's not saving you, you're not being saved. Where am I so focused on what God asked for that I haven't recognized His answer? How's the image of a loving God been impacted because of what I've been through and others haven't? And is there evidence in your life that your resilience to wait is a result of standing in God, answering your prayer? Thank you. Just reflect on this. Thank you.
Ain't seen a cloud in forever over me, but I believe your rain is coming. Yeah, I've been hanging on to high hopes, 'cause you're the one who's making dry bones come to life. You're the light I put my trust in. Every word you say is gonna come true. You will lead me to the promised land. Everything you say is gonna happen, even though I haven't seen it yet. I will build a boat in the sand where they say it never rains. I will stand up in faith. I'll do anything it takes with you in my sails. Your love never fails or fades. I'll build a boat in the desert place, and when the flood and the water starts to rise, yeah, I'll ride the storm, 'cause I got you by my side. With you in my sails, your love never fails or fades. I'll build a boat, so let it rain. You're the map, you're my compass. You help me navigate the currents under me. Take the lead, I surrender. Every word you say is gonna come true. You will lead me to the promised land. Everything you say is gonna happen, even though I haven't seen it yet. I will build a boat in the sand where they say it never rains. I will stand up in faith. I'll do anything it takes with you in my sails. Your love never fails or fades. I'll build a boat in the desert place, and when the flood and the water starts to rise, yeah, I'll ride the storm, 'cause I got you by my side. With you in my sails, your love never fails or fades. I'll build a boat, so let it rain. I'll build a boat, so let it rain. I will build a boat in the sand where they say it never rains. I will stand up in faith.